Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Alex Dworkin, and I'm a managing partner at 4D Capital. We specialize in a very unique mathematical approach to the stock market where we analyze the market and individual stocks in multidimensional space. And when we do, essentially perfect order emerges. Now, that allows us to predict the market and individual stocks with amazing accuracy. But another thing it does, it allows us to predict geopolitical events very, very accurately. And none of them are as important as what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, and we're going to continue to talk for quite a bit until that particular event unfolds. And that particular event is the nuclear exchange. And let me say that very clearly. Nuclear exchange between Russia and China alliance and NATO members. And I say exchange because the World War III, as we know it, has already started, okay? It's being played out around the world in various forms with the most direct one, I guess, at this point in time is the war between Ukraine and Russia, where Ukraine is being used as a proxy by the United States and NATO. I'm not giving anything out here against Russia. So that's the kinetic war, but there are many other points of interest around the world that will flare up over the next couple of years as we barrel down towards this particular outcome. So the nuclear exchange, according to our mathematical calculations, the nuclear exchange between Russia and China alliance and NATO members will happen in the summer of 2029, if we want to be more specific, in August of 2029, and it will be a complete nuclear exchange between the superpowers. And it will completely destroy the entire Northern Hemisphere. So the purpose of this broadcast is to educate you and show you why. It is also to discuss current events. And on the flip side of that, we're also going to be talking about how you can avoid such faith, protect your family, and even prosper during this period of time. So all of those things we're going to be discussing. What you see on the screen in front of you is the book that we published in 2014. We are updating this book, and the new version of it is going to be available later this week, perhaps early next week. We're going to let you know about that. But if you read this particular book, I'm going to leave it here. It was published in 2014, even before the Ukrainian revolution. And what you're going to see is this book has been prophetic as we moved into that time frame that was, even back then, we identified this period of time, and particularly 2028, 2029, as the point or the juncture where that nuclear exchange is going to take place. Now, there are two very important factors that I discuss in great detail in the description of this video. You will see two links. One of them is to a 84-year war cycle, and the other one talks about the stock market cycles. So let me just give you a very quick summary. Both of the cycles top in the summer of 2029, and both of them point to something very, very bad happening. And as I just described to you, that something very, very bad is the complete nuclear exchange between Russia and China alliance and NATO members. The war is already happening, okay, in various forms. But the nuclear exchange itself, which is very important to separate that because that's going to be the end of it, is going to happen in summer of 2029. So I'll let you know more about the book and the rest of it as it happens over the next couple of days. So let's talk about what's going on out there in the world today. Everything we've discussed on Mondays is actually coming to fruition much sooner. We discussed in great detail exactly why there cannot be peace between Russia and Ukraine, or Russia versus NATO, the United States, not alliance. The United States is obviously part of NATO, controlling member of NATO. What I'm trying to say, there cannot be peace between the United States and Russia at this point in time. We discussed that. We'll repeat that again today. And things are. Let's just very quickly go over the headline. Things are unfolding as more or less anticipated. Russia holds major nuclear drills led by Putin. Everybody's getting ready. Everybody's preparing. So this is the conversation that Rubio and Lavrov had. Everybody was very excited on Monday or even Sunday, because of the proposed meeting between President Trump and President Putin in Hungary. Okay, So everybody was very excited about it. If you recall, on Monday we came out and we said we don't hold much faith in that particular meeting because we are so far apart of what the United States wants, what NATO wants, and what Russia wants. And this particular phone call, what they talk about here, it proves that without any shadow of the doubt. So what we talked about is that you have to approach it from the Russian side and you have to approach it from the American side. And you have to see how far apart we are, okay? And from the American side, you have to understand something very clearly. This is not about Ukraine, freedom, liberty, none of that crap, okay? This is very simply about the United States of America. And it saddens me to say that, living here, trying to destroy the Russian Federation. It is the goal. It's been written in many war plans and those institutes of what their plan for Russia is. They want to defeat Russia. They want regime change in Russia. They want to break it into little parts, just as the 15 former Soviet republics broke away. And now you see what's going on in every single one of them. So they want to destroy Russia. They want to break it down into those small little portions. And they want to financially rape Russia in terms of resources and finances and the rest of it. I'm not making stuff up, right? You are aware that's the reality of the American government's plan. And they're using Ukraine as a battering ram to do just that, okay? From a Russian perspective, they also understand that, but I'm not entirely sure why they're not fighting back as much as they should be or could be, and they're not coming out and directly saying that. But from the Russian perspective, Ukraine being a part of NATO is a no-starter, right? So they want demilitarized zone for the entire nation, at least the western part or the eastern part of it, if you're looking from this side. The western part they're giving away to whoever wants it, but nevertheless, they don't want any NATO military presence in Russia because what's happening is Russia being surrounded as we speak, has been surrounded over the last 20, 30 years. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. And Russia wants to put a stop to it. But from my perspective, they're not being aggressive as they should be in fighting the Ukrainians, fighting NATO, and fighting the United States. It pains me to say it, but and I'll show you an article here in a second that explains it perfectly. But we are very far apart. So the primary purpose of Trump's proposed meeting with Putin was to freeze the conflict. And the only reason they want to freeze the conflict, remember, this is the deep state we're talking about, the United States. It doesn't really matter who the president is. It doesn't matter if it's Biden, Trump, Kamala Harris, or whoever it's going to be. The primary goal, the deep state's goal with Russia is its defeat, breaking it into little pieces and sucking out the resources that we need as American citizens to continue this way of life that we had. So if you're an American citizen, if you're a MAGA supporter, you can very well argue that this is a great thing because that's what we need. We need those resources and we need Russia's defeat in order to maintain our way of life. But you're forgetting one little thing. Russia is not Iran, Russia is not Iraq or Afghanistan, of any one of those nations. They are armed to the teeth with over 8,000 nuclear weapons, with at least half of them pointing in the United States. So for the people who are pushing this behind the scenes, the deep state, the military-industrial complex, they are one calculation away. Let me make this very clear. They're one calculation away from blowing up the entire world. And they will make that miscalculation. Rest assured, because our war cycle and our stock market cycle line up, and they very clearly indicate there's going to be no United States left. There's going to be nothing left. As a matter of fact, there's going to be nothing left of the entire Northern Hemisphere. So these delusional people I'm not sure if they want this or this is just a pure sheer stupidity miscalculation on their part, that they believe that if they're going to continue to push Russia further and further and further against the wall, Russia eventually is going to break. That's what they're thinking. But there will come a point, there are going to be a red line crossed. We talked about Tomahawk missiles. We're getting very close to this red line. And I talked about last time, December 13th of this year, being a very important juncture in American history, and something very important is going to happen. But they're going to cross the red line, and there's going to be an all-out conflict between Russia and the United States, and that eventually will go nuclear. Actually, it's very quickly going to go nuclear. The standard war that everybody's used to, World War I, World War II, previous conflicts, even smaller conflicts, Iraq, etc., is not going to happen. It's not going to be an army against army, and I'll show you why in a second as well. It's going to be skirmishes that will very quickly turn into a nuclear exchange. And once that nuclear exchange happens, that's it, lights out for the Northern Hemisphere. It's crazy, but the people in charge are psychopaths. That's the only proper description I can have. So, to conclude on this particular point, Russia and the United States are so far apart. Russia's not going to freeze the conflict because they very well understand that freeze means Ukraine's going to be rearmed, repositioned, and this whole thing is going to start again. So they don't want that. They want the win right now. But they're not acting strong enough. And that's the downside of Putin, and downfall of Putin, or downfall of Russia, I should say. Downfall of the Western Northern Hemisphere civilization, because his weak actions will lead to a war. He's just as much guilty of it as the American side. So, so they're so far apart after this conversation between Lavrov and Rubio that nothing's going to happen. So let's see what else. Sweden tells citizens to prepare for war mode. Good for you, Sweden. Okay, you couldn't remain neutral, right? You had to be part of NATO. So now your citizens will enjoy a quick death. Enjoy. So Trump is screeching Putin U-turn as White House says no plans to meet Russian president. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So everybody got excited. We talked about on Monday that Russia and the United States are so far apart, as we just described. Essentially, there is no meeting because the United States wants to defeat Russia, and Russia doesn't want to defeat the United States. It just wants to be left alone. But being left alone means defeat of Ukraine and putting its claim on perhaps portions of not prior Eastern Europe, but they just want to be left alone, let's put it that way, okay? They're not talking about expansion. So they're so far apart, there's going to be no freeze. So now something really, really bad is about to happen. If you know Trump, you know that he's going to blame Putin over the next couple of days. He's probably going to go back to supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine. And as we described on Monday, all of it is kabuki theater with Zelensky. Zelensky is their puppet. So think about Zelensky as general and Trump as president, and he's basically playing an act or playing his part, as we know. Oh, both of them are. And Zelensky does what Trump tells him to do, and Trump does what the deep state tells him to do, and it's as simple as that. And the deep state wants war with Russia, and they're going towards that. Freeze is not going to happen. So what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks is Trump's going to come out and say, hey, we're going to supply Tomahawks. And we'll talk about that later again as it becomes news again. But as we talked about it earlier on Monday or last week, Tomahawks can be nuclear tipped, right? And if one of those missiles is shot towards Russia by Ukraine with American help, how are they going to respond? So something bad is going to happen in the middle of December. Really, really bad. I talked about that point previously. Let me just mention it very quickly one more time. Okay, so December 13th of this year, plus or minus 2 weeks, let's say, margin of error. Actually, it could be a longer margin of error, and we can already argue that we are within that margin of error, but looking at the stock market, I think we're still safe for at least another 30 days. So this point is directly proportional to December 7th of 1941, which was Pearl Harbor and official entry of the United States into World War II. So it is a very historic marker for the United States. And I talked about before how none of the conflicts that are on the table today, including Iran and Venezuela, can swing the markets as much as what our work suggests. And that means that there's going to be a major escalation of conflict between the United States and Russia. It could take form in many forms. I talked about a possible decapitation strike against Russia by the United States. As crazy as that might sound, that is a real possibility. And if that happens, there's going to be a nuclear response on perhaps not directly on the United States, but perhaps on some of the bases around the world that we have. And obviously, that's going to be really, really bad. But that's the situation we're looking at. So let's see what else. So Western Europe preparing for conflict with Russia. No news there. They've been preparing for many years. EU is unable to fulfill Ukraine's shell promise. So there's a shortfall of 300,000 artillery rounds, according to the bloc. And I wanted to just very briefly mention this because it's nearly impossible to have at this stage your regular typical conflict that we're so used to of army against army that we've seen in World War II, a smaller conflict since then, a latter one being in Afghanistan and in Iraq, of army going against army in this particular situation, because the Western world is ill-prepared for what needs to happen in order to get the manufacturing going for this. So there are significant shortfalls. I forgot the statistics, but I believe Russia is manufacturing more shells in 1 month than by a factor of like 5 than what the NATO can manufacture as a bloc over a 1 year period of time. Don't quote me on that. It's a number where I remember reading something like that. It's a mental note. But there cannot be a conflict because or standard conflict. It will very quickly turn into a nuclear war because there's going to be very quickly a losing side, which most likely is going to be NATO. Because once again, you cannot forget that Russia is going to be supported by China. North Korea doesn't really count; it's a small country. But Russia is going to be backed by China in various capacity, and NATO will very quickly find itself on the losing side of this war, and because of that, there's going to be a nuclear exchange. So those people who wait to see the actual conflict break out, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen like this. There's going to be one day, it's going to be skirmishes like we see today, but when the timing is right, boom, somebody's going to do something stupid. Someone's going to send a tomahawk missile towards Moscow. Moscow's going to overreact. And this is, of course, I'm talking about 29. Moscow's going to overreact and shoot a bunch of missiles towards the United States, and boom, we have a nuclear exchange. So you went to sleep thinking everything's okay, and you never wake up. Something similar to that, okay? I wanted to go over this particular article from Paul Craig-Roberts because I think he's one of the very few analysts that's right on the dot in terms of this whole thing going on between Russia and the United States. So a note from PCR about the situation on the Russian front. So basically what he talked about now, there's a rising tide of dissatisfaction against President Putin in Russia. And the reason for that is because Russia is being hit deep inside Russia, their oil facility, manufacturing facility, by the Ukrainian. Of course, all of that is happening with the help of the United States. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say all of it is happening not with the help of the United States, but with the direct participation of the United States. You don't have to be a genius to figure out, no matter what they say on the TV, but basically they're Americans perhaps not pulling the actual trigger or pushing the actual button, but the CIA is involved in, the State Department is involved in this, obviously the military industrial complex and Pentagon are involved in providing targeting providing weapons, and doesn't really matter who's pushing the button, it's very clear that the United States now is in a direct conflict with Russia. Once again, as bad as it hurts me to say that, and I, as well as 95% of Americans, don't want any part of this. It pains me to say it, but we are at war with Russia. So now, more and more people in Russia are beginning to realize it. They're getting pissed off, and they want Putin to act tough. I think that's what's going to happen going forward. So this is very important. The chances that the world is indeed headed to war would be reduced if the American, British, and European foreign policy committees were capable of discussing the factual reality. But as I talked about, they don't want to discuss the factual reality, but because their primary objective is defeat of Russia. Okay, so unless that objective changes, everything they do makes sense. Okay. Instead, anyone such as myself present the situation is rudely dismissed by attack, as long as I think I wanted to read something else about this. Okay, yeah, I think this portion. Once the Trump gang understood that Putin would not agree to a ceasefire in place and that Putin was not going to yield to Trump's demands, the White House signaled that the Trump-Putin meeting was off the table for the time being. And that's exactly what I talked about earlier. That's why. Okay, so Ukraine is losing badly if you look at the overall composition of the front line, and they want to freeze the conflict at the very least. And Russia said no, they're going to keep going. So with them being, so far apart, there's no reason for them to meet. But expect a significant escalation from the Trump side over the next couple of days and weeks. So J.D. Vance, this is yesterday's news of the day before. Basically, Israel broke ceasefire with Gaza by bombing them again. As much as I hate to admit, we called it as soon as that happened. So that amazing, incredible, once in a lifetime, once in a generation, 1 in 1,000 years peace deal that Trump so much promoted and talked about. The great peacemaker about to get us into a nuclear war with Russia has vanished, basically. So as expected, as predicted, as talked about here, Trump threatens to eradicate Hamas. I mean, what else can you do to them? I mean, you can drop a nuke on Gaza and completely, I guess, you won't even kill Hamas even then because they're down in the tunnels. I mean, how? Explain to me, President Trump, how are you going to eradicate anyone other than dropping perhaps a nuclear weapon on them? It's just sheer stupidity, insanity, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, give him a peace prize. I guess he hasn't killed enough people to get the peace prize. Perhaps when the entire Northern Hemisphere is gone and 4 billion people are dead, perhaps that's going to be the time where he's going to get it. So EU and UK developing measures to give Russian assets to Ukraine. Okay, go ahead. Let me just make a mental note not to invest in Europe or the UK, allocate any sort of capital towards any companies that have any sort of business or dealing. Well, that's a broad statement, but that none of the money goes to Europe or the UK. I will not allocate it, and I'm sure a lot of people looking not only on the money management side, but actually probably on the money management side, nobody's looking towards this particular situation because everybody's greedy and nobody really cares. But I'm sure there are a lot of countries that are looking at the European Union and the UK and saying, hey, if you do this, we're done. We're not trusting you, and their economies, whatever's left of their economies, will collapse. Let's see. So the last thing is rare earth stocks soar after mega U.S.-Australian mineral deal to slash dependence on China. Yeah, let's see what happens out of it. If Australia was able to produce all those rare minerals to begin with, they would have done this a long time ago, and China wouldn't be a player. Well, China would be a player, but obviously Australia would be a big competitor. So once again, this is just a PR stunt. A lot of those rare earth minerals are coming out only from China, They're not going to come out of Australia. So this is just yet another PR move by the Trump administration to make it look like they're winning the trade war, which we talked about. They're losing, and they're losing badly. As a matter of fact, we argued that there's absolutely no need for any sort of a trade war at this point in time. There's much better ways to go about all of this. This will bring absolutely nothing but disaster and inflation. So what I was trying to say is going to significantly reduce or lower Americans' economic stance. Okay. So and finally, I guess a bit of a good news if it's true. So AI or NVIDIA is going to make chips here in the United States. That's always welcome news. Whether or not it's true, we'll see. Whether or not different components are coming from different places, but also in need of rare earth minerals here. But it would be a step in the right direction, because by us relying on foreign nations supplying them, particularly Taiwan, and that whole situation with China is not a good idea. So that's it for today. Hopefully you found this helpful. Please check out some of the links in the description of this video. We talk about the 84-year cycle. We talk about the stock market cycle. We clearly explain why the war is going to happen, or why the nuclear exchange is going to happen in 2029. And we'll be back with another update tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.